All right, good morning, everybody. Welcome to our Encouraging Truth series that we're doing. We are doing this in hopes to jumpstart your week and give you something encouraging for all week long that you can think about and maybe focus on. For those of you that don't know anything about our ministry, you go online to, here you go, womensbiblestudy.com. You can find out everything you want to know about us there. We have lots and lots of videos. We have over 350 videos that you can watch of different Bible studies. We've done Luke and Acts and Revelation and studies on Moses and Joshua. Lots of really good, important content on there that you can learn from. So today, what I want to do is I want to talk about something that I think we all deal with at some point in our life. And it's this feeling of wanting to get back at the people who hurt us. Because a lot of us have situations in our life where we've heard words at us like this. I'm leaving you for someone else. I just don't love you anymore. Oh, by the way, you're fired. How about our friendship is completely over? And we've always had situations in our life where we respond to people that maybe have hurt us in this manner. We say things like, I'm so upset with you because you stole from me. I just can't get over the fact that you gossiped about me. I don't even understand how you could lie to me. And how you would do something, or that you said you would do something, but then you didn't do it, and I just can't get over that. And so no matter what situation you and I find ourselves in, there's a lot of times in our life when we just feel hurt and angry and devastated. And so what comes out of us sometimes is this. The response is, how can I get back at the person who devastated my life? What can I do to make them pay for what they did to me? In New York, from 2003 to 2005, a number of former teachers and school administrators reported a rash of vandalism at their homes. They would wake up to punctured tires, roofing nails scattered all over their driveways. Their garage doors or their mailboxes were splattered with paint. Some victims complained that this would happen every 2 weeks. It went on for nearly 2 years until finally the perpetrator got caught. And it turned out it wasn't like a rebellious student at their school, but instead it was a former 72-year-old co-worker named Thomas Haberbush, who was completely angry with all of these people for all of those years because someone gave him a poor performance review in 1977, and he was dismissed as a teacher. The police investigator said, I have never seen anyone carry a grudge like that for 30 years. See, that's a lot of wasted years. So let's find out, what does the Bible say we should do? If someone hurt us, should we seek revenge? So what does God say? Well, here you go. God says to do nothing. You're like, nothing? That doesn't work for me. But why? Why does God say do nothing? And here's why. Because the people who hurt us are not our problem, but instead they are God's problem. If we're followers of Jesus, then our problems now are God's problems, which means the people we give to him. Hebrews 10:30 reminds us of this. He said, for we know him who said, vengeance is mine, retribution and the meting out of full justice rests with me. I will repay. I will exact the compensation, says the Lord. And again, the Lord will judge and determine and solve and settle the cause and the cases of his people. God says, I will seek vengeance on the person who hurt you. So our encouraging truth number 18 for today is this. God will take care of our enemies. Comedian Buddy Hackett said, I've had a few arguments with people, but I never carry a grudge. You know why? Because while you're carrying a grudge, they're out dancing. And that's so true. The truth is this, revenge is a burden. And when we carry that burden, what we don't realize is that all the people that burden is for, they're out having a good time. They're not even thinking about that they hurt you. See, unforgiveness leads to revenge. And what happens is it ends up hurting you worse than it does the person that you want the revenge on. It's like acid. It ends up wounding the thrower of the acid worse than it does the one who receives the acid. as Jesus followers, we have to remember this, that God always allows people and circumstances to come in our life for a particular reason. And if someone hurts us, as a follower of Christ, we can say, wait a minute, that person hurt me, but maybe God is trying to do something in my life. Maybe he's trying to move me out of an unhealthy relationship. Maybe he's trying to move me to a new place. Maybe a new job, maybe a new ministry, a new church, maybe a new spouse, a new home, a new location to live. Like, God will use people to hurt us to get us to different places in our life. So we're going to always have to put on what I call our God glasses. And we have to start looking at life through the eyes of God. How does he see things? What is he doing in my life? Not the glasses that I normally put on that's just like, they hurt me, poor me, wah, 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 wah. We don't want to be like that. If we belong to Christ, what we deem as really, really painful, God can use for something good. And when someone comes into our life and does something to hurt us and turn our life upside down, revenge is never something that's up to us. When we add God into our equation, that's why we never have to retaliate, because he's a part of what's going on in our life. We need to always remember that God is that big. God is that big that he can deal with those that hurt us. And so today we're going to learn this from a story in the Bible with King Saul and David. When the Israelites made their way into the promised land, they were always governed by God. Like, God led them 40 years with Moses through the wilderness. They came in, and so God was like their king. He always fought for them. They prayed. He's the one who got them out of, they need water, they need food. He's the one who got it for them. But once they got into the land, they became kind of stubborn. They got comfortable. They started looking around at surrounding nations. And they're like, wait a minute. That nation has a king, and that nation has a king. And that's not fair. We want a king. And God's like, no, trust me. That's a really, really bad idea. You do not want a king. If you get a king, let me tell you what the king's going to do. He's going to destroy your life. He's going to take your children away, put them in slave labor. He's going to tax you. He's going to take things from you. And God warned them over and over, and they're like, nope, sorry, but we want a king. So God's like, okay, you want it. I'm tired of arguing with you. You can have it. And so he chooses a man by the name of Saul for the job. Look at 1 Samuel 10, verse 17. Samuel called the people together to the Lord at Mizpah, and he said to the Israelites, thus says the Lord, the God of Israel, it was I who brought you up out of Israel, out of Egypt, and delivered you out of the hands of the Egyptians and of all the kingdoms that oppressed you. But you have this day rejected your God, who himself saves you from all your calamities and distresses, and you have said to him, no, set a king over us. God says, I have this perfect plan, but you're doing the absolute opposite, and nothing good's going to come of that. I was talking to someone the other day. She was talking to me, and she said, Lisa, the world is in such a mess. Why would God let it get to this point? And I laughed, and I said, well, I kind of don't think it's God's fault. I said, he's given us the Bible. He's given us his word. He's told us what we need to do to live a blessed life where, he can bless our nation. But the problem is nobody's picking up their Bible and reading it. Nobody's getting their what we need to know from him. We're getting it from the news media. We're getting, how to live life through self-help books. Nobody wants to pick up the Bible and hear what God has to say. The Israelites were doing the exact same thing. So what happens is now we live in America where they just want to riot. And they think that killing babies is okay. And they think that living in homosexual lifestyles is okay. And they think that living with your, girlfriend or boyfriend or whoever without being married is okay. And we have this country filled with no repentance, just like the Israelites, no turning back to God, just like the Israelites. So I said, I really don't understand why this is any of God's fault. Like, it seems to me like we've done this ourselves, just like the Israelites did this to themselves. That's just the place that they were in. God says, no. You don't want a king, trust me. And they ignore God, just like America is ignoring God too. So God chooses a man by the name of Saul. Handsome, good looking, kind of tall, God sets him up to be the first king of Israel. At the time, he's humble, he's fearful. The thought of being king was terrifying to him. It's this funny scene. There's this scene where they got everyone together and they're like, "Welcome, your new king, Saul." Everyone's clapping. Well, Saul never comes to the microphone. It's kind of like, "Once again, this is King Saul." And he never shows up to the microphone. They're like, "Where is he?" He was back hiding in the luggage, in the baggage area. He was terrified. He's like, "I don't want to be king. I don't even know what that means." But that's what happened. He started out very, very just humble and just fearful for his job. But as he grew in his role, he became arrogant, he became jealous, and he reigned 42 years. But during that time, he refused to obey God. So during his time of being a king, God said, "I will raise up another king to take your place." And so he goes and Samuel, the prophet Samuel, goes to David's house. There's 7 brothers. And he anoints King David to be the next king. Well, David's like a teenager, 12, 13, 14, 15, somewhere around there. And he's like, "We have a king." So he goes back to tending to sheep because that's just kind of how awesome David is. And it would be about 15 more years before David actually reigned as king over anyone in any portion of Israel. But during those years, God taught David valuable lessons that we can learn from on allowing God to seek vengeance on the one man that hated him, and that was King Saul. King Saul hated David. Through a series of events, God was promoting David. As a young boy, he went to give his brother some food when they were in a fight with the Philistines, and there was Goliath, and no one wanted to take on Goliath, but little David took on Goliath and won. And instead of people pouring out their praise on King Saul, now they were pouring out their praise on David. And that made Saul angry. And so for 15 years, crazy King Saul tried to kill David over and over and over again. He threw spears at him. He hunted David in the wilderness with thousands of his men by his side. But when the opportunity came for David to take revenge on the man that was killing him, he couldn't do it because he knew it wasn't his job to take revenge. Here's what he knew. God controlled Saul's life until God decided Saul's days on earth were over. God controlled when Saul would live and when Saul would die. That would never be up to David. We read in the next passage this proper view of vengeance on our enemy, because even as Saul was hunting David, David teaches us valuable lessons of the importance of letting God handle our enemies in his timing. Let's read 1 Samuel 24, starting in verse 1. When Saul returned from following the Philistines, he was told, "Behold, David's in the wilderness of En-Gedi." So Saul took 3,000 chosen men out of Israel and went to seek David and his men among the rocks of the wild goats. He came to the sheepfolds on the way where there was a cave, and Saul went in to relieve himself. I love it. He has to go to the bathroom. So there's no porta potty. So of course he has to go into a cave to just kind of have some privacy. But here's what he didn't know. That David and his men were sitting in the cave's innermost recesses. David's men said to him, "Behold, the day of which the Lord said to you, behold, I will deliver your enemy into your hands, and you shall do to him as seems good to you." So David arose in the darkness, stealthily cut off the skirt of Saul's robe. Afterwards, David's heart smote him because he had cut off Saul's skirt. He said to his men, "The Lord forbid that I should do this to my master, the Lord's anointed, to put my hand out against him when he is the anointed of the Lord." So David checked his men with these words and did not let them rise against Saul. But Saul rose up and left the cave and went on his way. See, this is just this beautiful picture of trusting God with our enemies. David knew God would take care of Saul without David's help. I laughed at this. This was kind of cute. This woman, she wanted revenge on her husband. She asked him to go shopping, and apparently he said no. So she went shopping, and she went to buy the dress that she was buying. And the lady at the cashier, she said, "Will this be cash, check, or charge?" And the woman was fumbling through her purse, and she was looking for her wallet, but what came out was her TV remote control. And the lady said, do you always carry a TV remote in your purse? And the woman shopping said, no, but my husband refused to come shopping with me today, so I figured this was the best revenge I could do to him legally. And I thought that was good. We're just always looking for a way to get back at someone. But David wasn't like that. And he always taught us something completely different, that we're to allow God to enact justice in his perfect timing. Because what we learn from David is this, that even the people who have wounded us are people that God has created. So what right do we have to settle the score? That person may come to know Jesus in 10 years from now. I don't know. What right do we have to take matters into our own hands? See, David teaches us we have no rights at all, to try to destroy someone who hurt us. That right belongs to God alone. Look at how the story plays out. Saul leaves the cave, 1 Samuel 24, verse 8. So David arose afterward. He went out of the cave and he called out to Saul. He said, my lord the king. When Saul looked behind him, David stooped with his face to the earth and bowed. Now, isn't that amazing? He didn't start yelling at him and who do you think you are? And you know, you should stop. He bowed to him. He gave him reverence because he was the king. And David said to Saul, he's like, Saul, why do you listen to the words of men who say, indeed, David seeks to harm you? In other words, I would never do that to you, Saul. He said, look, this day your eyes have seen that the Lord delivered you today into my hand in the cave. And someone urged me to kill you, but my eye spared you. And I said, I will not stretch out my hand against my Lord, for he is the Lord's anointed. Moreover, my father, see the corner of your robe, it's in my hand. For in that I cut off the corner of your robe and did not kill you, know and see that there is neither evil nor rebellion in my hand, and I have not sinned against you, yet you hunt my life to take it. He's saying, let the Lord judge between you and me, and let the Lord avenge me on you, but my hand shall not be against you. In other words, if I'm wrong, God will take care of me. If you're wrong, God's going to take care of you, but I'm not going to do anything to hurt you. Verse 13 is the proverb of the ancients say, wickedness proceeds from the wicked, but my hand shall not be against you. After whom has the king of Israel come out? Whom do you pursue? A dead dog, a flea? He's saying, Saul, I'm nothing to you. Why are you so bent on hurting me? He says, therefore let the Lord be judge and judge between you and me, and see and plead my case and deliver me out of your hand. So it was when David had finished speaking these words to Saul, that Saul said, is that your voice, my son David? And Saul lifted up his voice and wept. Then he said to David, you are more righteous than I, for you have rewarded me with good, whereas I have rewarded you with evil. And you have shown this day how you've dealt well with me. And when the Lord delivered me into your hand, you did not kill me. For if a man finds his enemy, will he let him get away safely? Therefore may the Lord reward you with good for what you have done to me this day. And now I know indeed that you shall surely be king, and that the kingdom of Israel shall be established in your hand. See, that is this great end to this story, that David refused to retaliate. And Saul seems to be repentant, like, David, I'm sorry, I'll never do this again. But think about this, David did the right thing. He refused to seek vengeance on Saul. And it seems like God would just bless him for that and restore their friendship and everything would be fine. But that's not what happened. Like, David walked away and trusted that God would deal with Saul. But unfortunately, years later, Saul hunts David down again. We see it in 1 Samuel 26. Then Saul arose and went to the wilderness of Ziph, having 3,000 chosen men of Israel with him to seek David in the wilderness of Ziph. Saul brings 3,000 men into the wilderness to find Saul. He cannot get over his bitterness, his jealousy, his arrogance. He can't get over it. It's eating Saul alive. Verse 5, so David arose and came to the place where Saul had encamped. David saw the place where Saul lay, and Abner the son of Ner, the commander of his army. Now Saul lay within the camp with all the people encamped around him. So David looks down and sees everyone asleep, and there's Saul, and there's the guy who's supposed to be protecting Saul, and everyone's around him. So David and Abishai came to the people by night, And there Saul lay sleeping within the camp, with his spear stuck in the ground by his head. And Abner and all the people just lay around him. No one heard David. Then Abashi said to David, God has delivered your enemy into your hand this day. Now therefore, please let me strike him at once with the spear right to the earth, and I will not have to strike him a second time. But David said to Abashi, do not destroy him, for who can stretch out his hand against the Lord's anointed and be guiltless? David said, furthermore, as the Lord lives, the Lord shall strike him, or his day shall come to die, and he shall go out to battle and perish. The Lord forbid that I should stretch out my hand against the Lord's anointed, but please take now the spear and the jug of water that are by his head, and let us go. So David takes the spear and the jug of water by Saul's head, and they got away, and no man saw or knew it or awoke. Why? For they were all asleep, because a deep sleep from the Lord had fallen on them. I love that. Verse 12, the deep sleep from the Lord. It's this reminder that God really honestly knows every little place that you're at and where you're going and what's going. Nothing is a surprise to God. God knew that Saul was still living. God knew that Saul was chasing David. He knew all of those things. But we have to remember that God will avenge our hurt in his timing, not our timing. What we need to remember is that the person who hurt us or destroyed our reputation is not unseen by God. It's not a shock to God. So trust that God wants to use that in your life. Now, it's amazing that Saul never ever learned his lesson, but instead he let his jealousy and his fear that David would take his throne completely destroy his life. But what we need to remember is God was always intimately involved in the whole situation, and God would never let Saul hurt David because he had a plan for David's life. That's what you and I need to be reminded of, that the person who is trying to hurt us will never succeed without God having a purpose behind it. Here's what happens. This becomes a trust issue with God. In giving our enemies to him, we are giving up any rights to vengeance. I loved what David did. 1 Samuel 26, verse 13. So David went up to the other side, stood on top of the hill afar, a great distance between him. He called out to the people and to Abner, the son of Ner, saying, do you not answer Abner? Then Abner answered and said, who are you calling out to the king? So David said, are you not a man? And who is like you in Israel? Like, why then have you not guarded your lord the king? For one of the people came in to destroy your lord the king. This thing you've done is not good. As the Lord lives, you deserve to die because you have not guarded your master, the Lord's anointed. And now see where the king's spear is in the jug of water that was by his head. In other words, they're gone. You did not protect him. David blames Saul's guard for not taking care of the king. And once again, we see this attitude with David that is kind of compassionate towards Saul, even though Saul's trying to hurt him. And that's a really difficult place. I was looking, the other day there was this thing on the internet, I don't know what it was, and it says, ex-husband mows lawn of his ex-wife for 26 years. And you're like, what? So I was reading it, it was like, you know, they had kids together and she remarried, but her husband was out of town or she's sick or something. So the ex-husband went over and just mowed her lawn every week. And I'm like, you just don't see that in this world. People want revenge. And see, it's very difficult to not feel revenge, especially if, like, let's say your husband left you for a younger woman. And they seem to be building this, like, awesome life together. It's different when your coworker lied about you and what they said wasn't true, and this other person got the promotion and you got fired. None of that's fair. It's difficult when someone actually says something and it completely ruins your reputation. It's difficult when someone steals from you and they got away with it. We wrote a book once called The Equation, and the reason we wrote it is because someone stole and lied and manipulated someone in our family and got away with it. And I literally could not get past it. And I wanted vengeance and I wanted God to destroy this person. But it's interesting, years and years have gone by, and that person is totally happy. See her on Facebook. She writes verses. She talks about Jesus. And I'm like, really? Like, you can steal and manipulate and hurt people, and yet on this side, I'm like, God, I just don't get that. But I just have to go, you know what? It's not up to me. Maybe there's a backstory that I don't know. Maybe she did it because I don't know why. Maybe there's something I'm not seeing. But I'm done worrying about it. And I'm done wanting vengeance for her. I'm just like, God, she's yours. You do something with her. And sometimes when we think that God is too slow in avenging his hurt, we need to remember that David ran from Saul for years and years and years and years and years. But when it was all done, and this is what's so cool about this, when it was all done, it wasn't even about Saul chasing David. It was about God using Saul to shape David to be the next king. And see, we have to believe that God is doing the same with us. He's using that person who hurt us to shape us into the person that God needs us to be, which is a loving, compassionate, forgiving verse. And once again, in the last scene, Saul looks up to David and says in verse 17, "Is that your voice, my son David?" He said, "It is my voice." And he said, "Why does the Lord pursue his servant? What have I done? What evil is in my hand? Please let my Lord the king hear the words of his servant. If the Lord has stirred you up against me, let him accept an offering. But if it is the children of men, may they be cursed before the Lord." In other words, if someone's telling you I'm doing these things, I'm really honestly not. Verse 23, "May the Lord repay every man for his righteousness and his faithfulness. For the Lord delivered you into my hand today, but I would not have stretched my hand out against the Lord's anointed." And Saul said to David, "May you be blessed, my son David. You shall both do great things and also prevail." So David went on his way and Saul returned to his place. See, David saw God in every situation. He trusted that if God wanted Saul to take his life, David saw God in every situation in his life. He trusted that if God wanted Saul, to be dead, then God would have to do that. It would not be up to David to do that. David knew this. God was in control of everything, even his enemy Saul. And that's a great reminder. And the sad ending to Saul's life is he was consumed by hatred, and it concluded on a battlefield where God took his life. But the good news is this, that David lived a guilt-free and sin-free life regarding this situation, because he did not take it upon himself to enact vengeance or to murder Saul. And that will always be our choice. For me, it was the person who hurt our family. And now what I say when I think of her is like, you know what, God, your vengeance is going to outweigh my vengeance. So I'm leaving that up to you. And if I ever see it in my lifetime, great. If I don't need to. I'm just trusting God that he'll take care of it for me. Romans 12:19 says this, "Dear friends, never take revenge. Leave that to the righteous anger of God. For the scriptures say, I will take vengeance, I will take revenge, I will pay them back, says the Lord." And that is your encouraging truth today. That the person who hurts you, stop wanting vengeance on them. It only hurts you. Hand her over to God, leave them with him, and then go on with your life, head held high, knowing that God has a plan for you. But maybe, just maybe, God used that person to move you to a new and wonderful place. Have a good day.